Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson at Minnesota Public Radio in St. Paul, one of the Twin Cities, the other being Minneapolis, which has been, as you know, at the center of the immigration enforcement surge by the Trump administration for weeks. And of course, about a week ago, we saw another American citizen, Alex Preddy, be shot and killed by federal authorities following the shooting death of Renee Nicole Good. Our DJ Tolliver is here as well. And Tolliver, of course, Minneapolis was also the place where George Floyd was killed by a police officer several years ago, which sparked those nationwide protests.
Yeah, I actually lived there for many years in Minneapolis, about 4 years, and I'm not surprised at what I'm seeing. Minneapolis stay ready, you know?
And a lot of neighborliness as well. We're going to talk this hour about where we go from here, not just in terms of Minnesota or immigration enforcement. There are bigger questions that have come up about the First Amendment, the right to peaceably assemble, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, the Fourth Amendment about unreasonable searches and seizures, all important pillars of our democracy. Listen here to Democratic Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, speaking just the other day.
This is an inflection point, America. If we cannot all agree that the smearing of an American citizen and besmirching everything they stood for and asking us not to believe what we saw, I don't know what else to tell you.
Now, the Trump administration has signaled a shift following Preddy's death. Earlier this week, the controversial immigration official Greg Bovino was removed from his post in Minneapolis, and President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, arrived to take his place. He said he's talked with state and local officials about agreements that could lead to a pullback of ICE in Minnesota.
If we get these agreements in place, that means less agents on the street. More agents in the jail means less agents in the street. This is common sense cooperation that allows us to draw down on the number of people we have here. Yes, I said it. Draw down the number of people here.
So our question this hour, what does what's happening in Minnesota mean for you, for the future of immigration enforcement, and for American democracy? Tolliver, can you give people the phone number, please?
Yeah, it's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com or comment on our live stream on YouTube.
Well, joining us this hour, Kevin Kiley, Republican Congressman of California. Congressman, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And Betty McCollum is a Democratic Congresswoman from Minnesota. Congresswoman, welcome to you as well.
Good to be here.
Well, Congresswoman, let me start with you. Following the shift in tone and the new leader, Tom Homan, what do you think needs to happen now to bring the temperature down?
I think we need transparency. I think we need some truth-telling, especially from the administration. And we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And I'm talking about the federal government right now. We just heard President Trump, I had CNN on at the Kennedy Center saying that there would be no drawdown. So maybe he meant in the future there could be, but he just said flat out he was not withdrawing anyone. So that's part of the problem that I'm having in trying to get people to come together for consensus. They need to be able to trust what their leadership's saying.
And the leaders to be on the same page. Congressman Kiley, what do you think? What do you think needs to happen now?
Yeah, so immediately in the wake of this tragedy, I said that we really need to just take down the temperature here. And I think that actually in at least a modest way, you have seen that in the last several days with that clip from Holman that you just played, for example. And I think there's been bipartisan agreement that we can talk about things like, funding for body cameras, for training when it comes to interactions with the public. In fact, those measures were in the House's version of the Homeland Security bill that already passed. And then on the other side of it, as part of this agreement that's in the works is thinking about, okay, how can we have immigration enforcement, which has been done by every modern president, conducted in as the least disruptive way possible. And the answer to that, especially when we're talking about the folks that everyone agrees ought to be at the top of the list, the top priority, which is those who have committed crimes, is to have an orderly transfer of custody within a custodial setting, so you're not forcing immigration enforcement out into the community. So that's been part of the talks I know in Minnesota, and I think it should be part of our discussions in Congress as well.
Well, and do you think, as some of your colleagues do, that Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, should be fired, that Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House, should go because they've been behind so much of what has angered people?
That's for the president to say, how he chooses to staff his administration. My role as a member of Congress is to exercise our, legislative and oversight authority under Article 1 to try to steer policy in the best possible direction. And I think that, that sort of compromise where we have some reforms coupled with, trying to assure that that enforcement occurs in the least disruptive custodial settings is probably the best path forward.
But you don't have an opinion on that, on whether they should go.
It's not my role to say who the president should have as his advisors. In my view, there are a lot of different voices in the administration, and I think that's frankly by design in every administration on every policy area. So, my role as a member of Congress is try to steer things in the direction that I think is best for the country.
Congresswoman McCollum, what do you think? Would it make a difference for you if some high-profile heads rolled here?
Well, it goes back to transparency, truth, and cooperation. First, I think I should, at a minimum, take a pause and regroup and figure out what they're doing wrong here that's causing so much angst. And you said you were going to talk about some of the rights in the Constitution later, so I won't go there. But let me just give you some clarity. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and in 2021 in the Appropriations Committee, we put funding in for body cameras for ICE. And President Biden said they should wear them. President Trump, shortly after taking office, said no, they would not wear body cameras. So for me, from my vantage point, and Kevin doesn't serve on the same committee that I'm on, so I'm not playing gotchas or anything like that, just the facts that I know personally from being on the committee. When they said, well, we're going to, put more body cameras in there on the House floor, nice gesture, but is the president going to require them to wear them? So the other thing about the transport, we have been transporting and telling ICE when we have the worst of the worst in our system when they're about to be released. There are pictures of two of the people that ICE took credit for, saying that we had failed to do our job in Minnesota, of them actually being transferred from our Department of Corrections. So this is why I think Kristi Noem needs to step down. Stephen Miller needs to change the rhetoric, and they need to be informing the president of the United States with actual facts, not with what they think he might want to hear or what they want to say so that they're on his good side. They have a real responsibility, and the two of them are not living up to it, in my opinion.
Congressman Kiley, we had a town hall earlier today here in Minnesota, spoke to ordinary Minnesotans, and one of the things that came up was a fear that's out there, in part because the ICE agents, as you know, have been wearing masks. The Homeland Security Secretary says that's so they don't get doxxed, but wearing masks in unmarked vehicles, they don't identify themselves. And it's very different to be, stopped and pulled over by somebody in that situation than a uniformed officer.
Yeah, so I do agree that it makes total sense to think about how we can try to have these enforcement operations done in a way that is as creates as little disruption as possible. And so I think that is going to be part of the negotiations that you're going to see happening in Congress. For folks, I think the news probably just covered it, that we have, an agreement to kind of do a temporary funding bill for Homeland Security as we debate these broader reforms. So I think you need to look at it from both angles. How do we have some, maybe it's more training or, other reforms in terms of how enforcement is conducted, but then also how do we, address jurisdictions that are not actually providing that sort of notice or providing for an orderly transfer of custody and forcing operations to go into the community.
Let me just ask each of you quickly before we get into phone calls about the issues of democracy. Congressman Kiley, do you have any concerns as you look at, some of the things that have happened in the last week, especially, and President Trump saying you can't bring guns and stuff like that after the killing of Alex Preddy? Are you worried about our democracy at all?
Well, I certainly think that political division right now is at a very unhealthy level. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges that we face as a country. And, when you have scenes like we saw, these tragedies play out, and there's, of course, varying narratives as to who's to blame and what ultimately precipitated it. But I think we can all agree it's a tragedy and we shouldn't be seeing things happen like that in this country. But you could also make the point that, when you're disrupting the enforcement of federal law in some manner, then that itself is sort of interposing yourself in the way in terms of stopping the execution of decisions that have been made by our political leaders who are democratically elected. And certainly, and well, of course, everyone absolutely has the right to protest. That's sacrosanct in our country, protected under the First Amendment. When that crosses a line to threats, to violence, to interfering with the enforcement of the law, that's an entirely different matter, and that's not something that is acceptable in a democratic society like ours.
Well,
Congresswoman McCollum, yeah, go ahead.
I'll get to your point about our rights, but I just want to correct something because I've actually personally witnessed some of these things. I witnessed Customs and Border Patrol going through the Menards store when I went to pick up another shovel because mine busted. And the disruption and the chaos, and there was no place for them to park. It was all show. Then I'm trying to still find a shovel. I'm at Target. And a couple of them come walking into Target, and I'll tell you that place went quiet because just a couple days earlier at a Richfield Target, citizens took their camera out and were pleading and trying to get the attention of Customs and Border agents that they were arresting a citizen who was just had their work vest on and had gone out in the bitter cold and get carts. So in Minnesota, we look out for each other. We care for each other. I don't think there should be any threats of violence towards any of these agents, but they certainly seem to not stop intimidating and threatening us.
Our number again is 844-4-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. And as we go to break here, Tolliver, what have you got for us?
This is Dua Soleil with Warm Pants. So they're a Sudanese immigrant who found fame in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and eventually the world. Easily my favorite artist to come out of the Twin Cities in the last decade. More of your calls coming up on The Middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson at Minnesota Public Radio in St. Paul. If you're just tuning in, we are a national call-in show focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, and philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking what the events in Minneapolis mean for the future of ICE and our democracy. Tolliver, what is the number to call in?
It's 844-4-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on Substack.
I am joined by Congresswoman Betty McCollum, a Democrat, and Congressman Kevin Kiley, a Republican. And let's go to the phones because they are lighting up. Adam is in southern Utah. Adam, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I am in support of ICE because I do want some law and order. I am not in support of any of them abusing their power, and that goes with any kind of law enforcement or local security, even if I'm just at a local event. But I'm trying to understand why is so much visceral on ICE when perhaps it's just one or two that are misbehaving, when we have people who are trying to protect our country, and have we already forgotten 9/11 and the results of unfortunately not catching people who try to infiltrate our country and then cause harm?
So you're saying maybe we're seeing a couple of bad apples in some of the events, but you overall would like the enforcement operation to continue even with the aggressive tactics that the Trump administration has been using?
Well, again, perhaps that needs to be reviewed. I can't speak because I'm not there locally, but to say we have one bad cop, therefore abolish the police, is just a step towards anarchy. And why do we just automatically paint all these ICE people as evil guys that are not trying to do good or help serve our country and protect our citizens? I don't understand why we're just painting the whole group as bad.
Adam, thank you for that call. Congresswoman McCollum, I'll go to you with that because I'm sure you've got a lot of constituents who are probably much more, I've heard from them today, much more anti-ICE at this point than Adam is. But what do you think about that you don't want to paint the entire enforcement operation that's been around for many, many years, many of them, in a bad light?
As a Democrat, people tried to do that with us in the Twin Cities that represent St. Paul, that we were out to defund the police. Quite the contrary. We wanted our police to have more training in de-escalation and work with them. And it's been fruitful for all of our community. Part of the problem that's happening is the chaos. And when you take a training program that used to be 6 months and now it's only 6 weeks, that's a problem. And Customs and Border agents that are out on our streets, they have an entirely different job than ICE. They are dealing with narco traffickers. They are dealing with, coyotes who are smuggling people across the border. They're not trained to de-escalate. They're not trained to be in urban settings. And when you have a leader, as they have with the man who just left, Mr. Bavino, somebody who's, I'm going to use the word, in my opinion, a showboat and not a serious law enforcement officer, you have this kind of chaos. So, we do need to have secure borders. We do need to have people who are criminals detained, arrested, and face the consequences. But that's not what we're seeing in Minnesota. We're seeing constituents. I've had constituents who are U.S. citizens pulled out of their cars in the middle of winter while they're sitting in their car just warming it up and arrested.
Joseph is calling in from Philadelphia. Joseph, go ahead with your thoughts. What does all this mean to you?
Yeah. Hi, Jeremy, and hello to your two guests. Well, as a 64-year-old black man who happened to be a Muslim, I know what injustice is like. Because, like the first caller, I'm not anti-cop, whatever. I have friends in the police department. But see, but the problem with ICE and police officers and any kind of law enforcement, when you talk about one or two bad apples, it's too often, Jeremy, that when the bad apples are running racket and mistreating people, killing people unjustly, the good cops or the good ICE sit back and don't sit next to the blue wall of silence. If you're not going to speak out against the ones that's doing wrong, then you're complicit in the problem. As Dr. King said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So when the good ICE people sit back and watch these thugs like they shot Sister Renee Good and Brother Pretty, when they don't say and call these people out, then they just as complicit. Because like I said before, the Congressman, with all due respect, the Congressman from California, they can talk all this stuff they want. That was murder. You can't justify it. Alex Pretty had a right as Second Amendment to carry his gun. Same with Renee Good. She was no threat to that officer. He shot her in cold blood, and them thugs that killed them need to be underneath the jail. They should get the death penalty, but I know they won't. But they should get the death penalty because they are a bunch of killing thugs. It's just what they are, thugs.
Okay, Joseph, thank you very much. Congressman Kiley, just picking up on one thing he was talking about there, do you worry about the reputation of law enforcement when not only you have some of the incidents that we've seen, but also when the administration comes out and says this is what happened and then has to walk back and say, actually, the video does not show that that's what we said?
Well, absolutely. I do believe there needs to be a thorough and transparent investigation with the public apprised of the basis for the conclusion that's reached and that allows people to judge for themselves. And I'd also say in response to the last caller that any citizen who feels that they've had their rights violated by anyone in law enforcement, of course, has a right to go to court and to vindicate those rights. But I would say, that there is, as the previous caller said, this risk of generalizing this to all who serve. And I think that is a mistake that we cannot make again. I think that unfortunately we did see that happen a few years ago, and you saw recruitment go down for law enforcement agencies across the country. And I think it's vitally important that we remember that the men and women who sign up for law enforcement, whether it's at the local level, whether it's federal law enforcement, whether it's federal immigration enforcement, these are public servants who are engaged in very challenging, necessary work, jobs that have been done by public servants in every single modern administration, and they're facing threats to themselves and their families in ways that are really unprecedented right now. And so I hope we can agree that whether you disagree with the policy, that we should all be able to support, the men and women who are serving the public.
Okay, let's go to Kevin calling in from Los Angeles, California. Kevin, go ahead with your thoughts.
Thank you. In the United States history, our biggest success has come where we meet in the middle, whether it was the founding fathers, during all the wars we've had and other conflicts, civil war, other conflicts, is where we meet in the middle. I see the far left saying get rid of ICE. That's wrong. I see the far right saying keep going, doing what they're doing, and that's wrong. The borders needed to be secured better, and they are better now. And folks who are here illegally and committing crimes need to get out. At the same time, I was in this country myself undocumented for 3 years. I'm a successful member of the society, and I'm a U.S. citizen now. We need to give a chance to those who want to follow that pathway to contribute to the U.S. And that's in the middle. And so I think a lot of your callers are either saying this is all wrong, needs to stop, get rid of ICE. Other callers are saying no, keep going. It's the middle that has made this country great in the past. It's the middle that's going to make us great. And I think that's what we need to talk about.
Well, Kevin, I will say
you.
that we've had 3 calls on the show so far, and we've had one on one side, one on the other, and then you in the middle. So I think that's pretty good. Congresswoman, I'll just ask you to respond to what we just heard there.
Right now it's very hard to find the middle because quite often on both sides of the aisle, if someone does go to the middle, they're considered a person that, is not being loyal to a side. And I work a lot with Republicans on the Appropriations Committee. That's why we have bipartisan bills that we're going to get passed through. And I'm hopeful that we can, find some middle ground to have better training, better transparency when somebody's acting out of line, wearing one of our federal uniforms, that they're reined in. And and I'll go back to this. The administration, the president needs to be served by people who are telling him the truth and the whole truth. One of the things that's causing so much angst in Minnesota is not only do we have, people with, rifles around our schools, around our clinics and our hospitals, just picking up anybody to make a quota because they're supposed to have 3,000 arrests a day.
I actually want to ask you, Congressman Kiley, about that. Do you think that the one step toward sort of changing the tone of all of this, even if you want to achieve the goals of the Trump administration on immigration, is to get rid of these quotas?
I don't really understand. I don't really know how the quotas work. I mean, I think that it's sort of a quantitative measure when I think that, the goal that has the broadest bipartisan support is more qualitative in nature, that we want to make sure that the folks who are the highest priority are those who pose a risk to public safety. So people who not just have entered the country illegally, but have committed crimes while here, which is why I do think it's so important that this, that this is something that we address in the bipartisan negotiations, is how do we handle these situations where state and local authorities are refusing to cooperate and are forcing these operations into the community. I actually had the chance to talk with Alejandro Mayorkas about this, who was President Biden's Secretary of Homeland Security.
Right.
And not someone commonly associated with, the Republicans or a sort of the Trump administration's immigration policy. But he said this to me, and when I asked him a question in committee, he said, "I do not consider it in the service of public safety to release an individual into the community when that individual can be released to Immigration and Customs Enforcement for prompt removal." And so I think that at the point at which the prior Secretary of Homeland Security subscribed to that view, hopefully that's something that we can forge some bipartisan consensus on.
I just want
yeah, go ahead.
I want to make a quick point here because there are quotas out there. They talk about making them. And so if you're really going to go after the worst of the worst, why are you in Minnesota? So here's a state-by-state comparison. Undocumented immigrants. Minnesota, maybe 100,000 undocumented immigrants. Florida, 1.22 million. Texas, 1.97 million. That's why Minnesota, in particular, with the protests and the things that you're saying is, what is this about? What's the end game? If what you want to go after is illegal, criminal undocumented, you're in the wrong state.
Tolliver, you've been monitoring what's coming in at listentothemiddle.com.
Yeah, it kind of took my thunder there because Andreas in the Twin Cities says, I think it's important to be honest and acknowledge that this was never really about immigration. This was always about political retribution. Minnesota has always handed over alien criminals to ICE. Stephanie in D.C. says, spouses of agents are isolated, silenced, and in fear. We send our beloved life partner out every day to the most vilified job in the world. This is not what we signed up for. Lots coming in.
Very interesting. Yeah. Again, our number is 8444 middle 844-464-3353. Brandon is calling in from Decatur, Georgia. Brandon, what about you? What do you think of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's heart crushing. You know, it's heartbreaking. I work in the hospitality industry with a lot of immigrants from all over the place. And ultimately, it no longer matters what your immigration status is. You know, we have people that are here for asylum. We have people that are going through the legal framework and doing things the right way, getting arrested outside of courthouses. And people I work with are scared about their kids going to school and what's going to happen. They're scared, you know, about are they going to be able to get home from work safely? You know, going to the grocery store. There's no way for them to proceed through life safely any longer. And you know, if this was truly about enforcing the law, then why aren't we holding these you know, people that work for ICE and work for our law enforcement to the standard of the law? And it really bothers me when I see some of the propaganda out there that is designed specifically to appeal to white supremacist groups. And it makes me believe that we are marching towards changing the promise of what America has offered to the world in so many ways. You know, the hopes for a better life, the hopes for a safe place to be, and better for, you know, the next generation.
Brandon, thank you very much for that call. Congressman Kiley, I want to go to you, and I'm just thinking back to what the Congresswoman was saying a moment ago, where she talked about some of the states that have a higher number of undocumented immigrants. One that she didn't mention is your state of California, along with Texas and Florida, have a lot. But as you heard Brandon there, is there a pathway, the way that there was the last time there was comprehensive immigration reform in the 1980s, where asylum was granted to the people who were already here who had not committed crimes? Do you see a world where that kind of thing happens to the vast majority of undocumented immigrants who are in the United States?
Well, these are kind of different questions, right? You know, one is about enforcement, the other is a policy determination. And so I think that right now there's so much, attention on how enforcement is being conducted that it's kind of taken the oxygen out of the room when it comes to these other questions dealing with policy, or frankly expanding the pathways for legal immigration into the country, which a lot of us support. I do think it's important to note that, you know, the scenes we're seeing in Minnesota, as horrifying as they are, it's not like we're seeing this everywhere throughout the country. You know, in areas where there is more cooperation, you don't see these same horrifying scenes. Now, I do acknowledge that there has been, I think plenty of voices, both within the administration and in Congress on both sides of the aisle, who have said, okay, maybe things are not perfect in the way they're being conducted right now. Maybe we need to be working on, doing things in a more targeted or a more focused way. And how can we give a little bit on both sides to make that possible?
Susanna is calling in from Sherborne, New York. Susanna, go ahead.
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you. So I am a naturalized citizen with several members of my family in various stages of, pursuing legal status. And I think what a lot of my Republican neighbors, I'm in a very heavily Republican part of New York, actually, upstate New York, where there's a lot of dairy farms and manufacturing and things like that. And I think what people on the Republican side are not understanding is that there's not some lottery or queue or line in which immigrants get in. You know, everyone's in a varying stages of trying to become legal. They pay thousands of dollars, throughout the years. They work. The overwhelming majority of them are not criminals. And I think that what I want to come out of Minneapolis is a look at the root of the problem, which is that there is not, I think it's less than 1 or 2% of the people who try to become citizens in the United States actually succeed. It's a very small number, and
very
there's a
difficult
misconception.
Yeah.
Right, and there's a misconception that they're sneaking in. They're not coming in legally. But a lot of the people that I've seen deported or under threat actually are in process, and now it's suddenly changing. TPS is revoked, or they
Susanna, I've got to leave it there just for time purposes. But thank you for that call, Tolliver. I just want to say, as in the case of Renee Good, authorities labeled Alex Preddy as a domestic terrorist after his shooting death.
Yeah, listen here to Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem speaking the day of his death.
When you perpetuate violence against a government because of ideological reasons and for reasons to resist and perpetuate violence, that is the definition of domestic terrorism. This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
And we now know, based on videos that are widely available, that that's not the facts. And the 2 officers who shot Preddy have been placed on administrative leave. Tolliver, what are we listening to here?
This is Minnesota's own Chastity Brown with Wake Up. I played a lot of shows with her over the years, and she's like as real as it gets. I know you guys are going to love this song. More of your calls coming up on The Middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This hour, we're asking what the events in Minneapolis mean for the future of ICE and our democracy. I'm joined by Democratic Congresswoman Betty McCollum and Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley. You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, or we're at listentothemiddle.com. Before we get back to the phones, I said I held a town hall earlier today with Minnesotans here at Minnesota Public Radio. One man we heard from was Victor, who is Latino. He's a naturalized citizen, but he says he's so afraid of getting caught up in this that he has to carry his passport around. Listen.
I woke up to an ICE truck sitting outside of my house as my kids were going to school, and they wouldn't leave. They didn't come out. They didn't knock on anybody's door. They just sat there to intimidate, I assume. That's the reality that we're living in. Even when you're not out there protesting, even when you're not, quote unquote, antagonizing, they are intimidating. They are coming to our front doors. They stole a safety of the refuge of my home for God knows what.
Kevin Kiley, does it upset you to have people in this country who are naturalized citizens living in fear like that?
Well, of course, that's not something that we want in any circumstances. And, where there are cases where, there are individuals who are overstepping their authority, then, of course, there needs to be consequences for that. And that, I think, is going to be part of the discussion that we're having in Congress here the next couple weeks about how, we can assure that all of the interests that we have here, protecting officers, protecting the public, executing the law, are all respected as much as possible. Absolutely, these are anecdotes that people have. I know that I've heard other anecdotes like that. But I'd go back to the point that we should try to figure out how we can focus our enforcement efforts where the vast majority of members of Congress and the vast majority of Americans believe they really should be focused, which is the way it's been done in prior administrations. I mean, it's important to note that immigration enforcement is not something new. It's existed in every modern administration. You've had, many people who have been put through, deportation proceedings. One of the things we actually did in H.R. 1 last year is to create more immigration judges, funding for immigration court, so people can get the process that they're entitled to. But this sort of thing is not anything new.
Let's get to another call. This is Luke, who's calling in from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hi, Luke. Go ahead.
Hi. So I guess I would say that we've had immigration enforcement in this country for a long time, but what we're seeing now, I think everybody can tell, is entirely new. I mean, the United States of America, one of the pinnacle foundations of it is the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, that you need a judge, somebody in the judicial system, not an ICE officer or an administrative official, to sign off if you're going to have, these cops or these federal agents banging down your door, entering your home, entering your schools. We have just really an insane authoritarian kind of occupation going on in our city. It's hard to convey to people how extreme it is, unlawful, unconstitutional, just totally terrorizing to people who are not in Minneapolis right now. It's really infuriating.
Luke, thank you. And Congresswoman, obviously you represent this area, so you know that we heard that today from so many people in our town hall, that the rest of the country doesn't really seem to understand what is really going on here in Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Experiencing the surge that we've seen, and I mentioned, what I just saw, just trying to get a snow shovel, is unbelievable. You can't drive down a street. I have constituents calling me. I have parents worried about their kids going to school, and it's all real. It's all really happening. And I'm talking to them directly, and they want it to stop, and it needs to stop. If we have a problem that needs to be solved, you don't keep the problem going. You stop, you take time, and you figure out how to solve the problem. And that's what we would like to see happen in Minnesota. And I'm just going to go back again. What we are seeing happen with citizens being stopped on the street and harassed. What we're seeing with people being pulled out of cars by their hair. People with disabilities, they're cutting their seatbelt off to get her out just because she turned the wrong way down the wrong street as she was trying to get to her doctor's. And then there's the things that we're not seeing with people staying home. We're not seeing healthcare aides show up at nursing homes. We're not seeing home healthcare people show up to help somebody with a ventilator because they're afraid they're going to get picked up even if they're here legally. That's just wrong to be happening in the United States. And I think we can all agree that it's time to take a deep breath and for ICE to stand down in Minnesota. 3,000 officers. That's never happened any other time in the history of our country. That's an invasion of the state of Minnesota, which has upheld the law and followed the law. Now it's time for the federal government to follow the law.
I want to go to Joseph, who's calling in from St. Louis, Missouri, has been on the line for a while. Joseph, thank you for waiting and welcome. Go ahead.
Good evening. I support ICE 100% and place a lot of the blame for the chaos and deaths that have occurred on the incitement of these blue state politicians, with Tim Wolf declaring Minnesota's at war with the federal government and encouraging people to harass and obstruct legitimate law enforcement, such that these poor protesters get all gassed up and feel like they're in Star Wars fighting the evil empire. I mean, if laws that we don't like are now optional, I hope Governor Kehoe here in Missouri says we don't have to pay taxes and encourages us to set up roadblocks and resist the feds. But as far as the future of ICE, I would like to see them move away from these targeted worst of the worst operations and go for a more administrative and regulatory approach to make it impossible for these illegals to work, to rent, to take out loans, to access benefits, and then to aggressively prosecute their employers, their landlords, and anyone.
So you think, Joseph, you think things aren't going far enough, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, I would just like, they're illegal. They need to go. That's everyone I talk to in my general, left, right, black, white, Hispanic, kind of a lower middle class setting I'm in. It's as simple, it's clear as day to them. They're illegal. They have to go. It's like the border. It's like, oh, what are we going to do about the border? Trump comes in. It's actually not. It's just simple. And so, yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
Okay. Joseph, thank you. Kevin Kiley, I imagine you have a lot of colleagues in Congress who probably agree 100% with what Joseph just said.
Well, I think it is certainly true that the inflammatory rhetoric has not helped matters. And that's why I said in the immediate wake of this tragedy that let's just find a way to turn the temperature down. And let's try to get everyone on the same page here and understanding that our federal officers have a job to do, and we want to make sure they're doing their job in a way that is minimally disruptive, that's in accordance with the law, and that we are in the process protecting not only the officers themselves but the public. In addition to that, and I think that we have.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I do just want to say that right after the sort of everyone said turn the temperature down, your colleague, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, was attacked. And the first thing that President Trump did was say that, she did it to herself or something, which was not at all turning the temperature down. What do you think about that, Kevin Kiley?
I think we all can, take that advice and try to find ways to find common ground, especially on an issue as, that is where passions are as high as they are right now. But as I kind of said at the outset of the program, I do think we've actually seen that to some degree the last few days, where we're going to probably not have a government shutdown now, knock on wood, and we're going to come together. And I think you've already seen members of both parties who say, yeah, there's maybe some good ideas on both sides here. And where you even have an agreement, perhaps in Minnesota, as Mr. Holman said, where we're going to actually, provide more orderly transfer of custody from people with criminal records to ICE, and then potentially have fewer ICE officers there. So I think these are actually all positive steps, and I think that's what we want to build on.
Okay. Let's get to just a couple more calls here, and let's go to Robert in Houston, Texas. Robert, what about you? What does all this mean for you?
Okay. First of all, what I told your interviewer, I don't think any of these newer ICE people from this past year have been properly vetted. First of all, okay, and it makes me feel like they are the militia that someone was looking for to be their personal army, because he has so many vendettas. And the thing is, what do they get out of the 5-year-old boy here in Houston taken to a detention center? What does that do for them? We never had problems with ICE. ICE did their job. We never had problems before now, okay, until this current administration came into office, okay? And it's crazy. I'm a 71-year-old black man, and because of my physical appearance, people think I'm Arab. They think I'm Hispanic. They think I'm everything but what I am, and I'm walking around here anxious because I think they might assume me to be what I'm not, and I've got to deal with it. It's just that crazy, and I'm in Texas.
Yeah.
Just saying, man. Okay.
Right, Robert. Thank you very much. Well, Congressman, what do you think about that? I mean, he does bring up a point that I've heard before, which is, and we've talked about it a little bit this hour, which is that a lot of these new ICE recruits have not gotten the kind of training that somebody that's been in the force for a long time has, and maybe that's part of the problem here. Congresswoman McCollum.
I heard Congressman, I'm sorry. And I didn't want to interrupt because
it's been a long day. Maybe I said the wrong thing.
Civil. And we are, both of us are. I think that the training is part of it, but the vetting's not very good. And there have been solid reporting done in news organizations of people going online. One woman journalist went online. She deliberately knew she wasn't going to pass the drug test. She put other things on the application that should have been red flags. And she found out that she had been accepted to become an ICE officer and get, $50,000.
Because they're giving $50,000 bonuses to new ICE officers.
Yeah, right. They're smart, though. They do spread it out over 5 years. But, they're not vetting, they're not training. It's a hurry up to make this impact again, to dragnet and get as many people as you can so you can say that you're making a quota to keep a campaign promise. And I really do hope that in the coming weeks, if we can avoid this government shutdown, it looks like we are, that we can actually talk about what needs to happen. And the president's going to have to change what he has allowed to happen so far with poor training, poor vetting, and these surges and the names that things are given. I mean, using catch of the day in our neighboring North State, Maine, was just disgusting. This isn't a joke. These are people's lives that are being disrupted forever and communities that are being disrupted and ripped apart right now. And to experience it firsthand is something I don't want any other American city to experience.
Let me get to one more call here, and I'm going to go to Beth in Two Harbors, Minnesota. Beth, go ahead with your thoughts.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I really wish we would get beyond this like stupid policy. You know, what's wrong with the policy? This president came to Minneapolis because of the George Floyd protest. It was incredibly difficult, upsetting what happened with George Floyd and the police officer. And his reaction was, let's go to Minneapolis because they're going to blow up if we attack them. And that will justify sending in the military. He's been trying to get the military into all these cities. He wants to use us as a training ground. This is a president who talks about immigrants as eating cats and dogs. Let's stop pretending what this is. He's ended immigration for 75 countries except for white South Africans. Okay? Everyone says, oh, he's not a racist. But the racists all support him. And as far as protests,
well, Beth, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there because
he pardoned all the 9/11. He pardoned
all the January
6th,
6th protests. Yes, Beth, we've got it there, and I want to just allow our guests one more final thought here. Kevin Kiley brings us back to the issue of democracy. She brings up the question of whether Trump wants to send the military into various places. Do you think? Do you have an opinion on whether or not he should invoke the Insurrection Act, which he's threatened to do?
I haven't looked at the actual legal basis for that. I mean, I think that what we want to have is cities that are safe, and I think that actually in D.C. the city did get a lot safer when the Guard was there. But that's a different story in Washington D.C. because Congress and the federal government have direct authority over Washington D.C. And so I think that the best case scenario here, and actually San Francisco is a pretty good example of this. There was talk of the Guard going to San Francisco, but the mayor had a conversation with the president. And he highlighted that some of the progress San Francisco has made lately, that he said we would actually like federal assistance in X, Y, or Z, but not in this way. And they reached an agreement. And I think that that's the way that things should be done. And, is we can find ways to work together across party lines, whatever you think of the president, whatever you think of a given governor or mayor, if we can try to find ways to come together around keeping our cities safe and upholding the values we all share as Americans, then we'll be in a lot better shape.
Congresswoman, the last word to you. And I'll just say, today I was able to visit the memorial to Alex Preddy, which is just a few blocks away from the memorial to Renee Good, which is just a few blocks away from the George Floyd memorial, which sparks nationwide protest. But what would you say to our listeners around the country about what's happening here in Minnesota?
We know we've been targeted. We've been working very hard to get the truth out. The truth is, we cooperate, we have been, and we're being used as an example, but we're not going to take the bait. We're going to help our colleagues, work colleagues, we're going to help our neighbors get the food that they need, their children to go to school, to get their businesses running, and we're going to stand up for and protect our rights. Believe what you see with your eyes, don't believe the lies. And remember, you have rights. And right now in Minnesota, we're standing up for them.
That is Democratic Congresswoman Betty McCollum of Minnesota. We've also bbeen speaking with Republican Congresswoman Kevin Kiley of California. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And many stations, we bring you the special town hall we recorded today in Minnesota, or you can always catch it on our podcast. Just find the middle wherever you listen to podcasts.
And don't forget to subscribe to our free weekly newsletter, which is now on Substack. It's at listentothemiddle.com. Oh, sorry, listentothemiddle.substack.com. Jeremy, before
Get it
you leave,
right,
make sure you have a
Tolliver,
juicy
come on.
Lucy, okay?
Okay. Thanks to our hosts here at Minnesota Public Radio, especially Stephanie Curtis and Randy Johnson at the board. The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Bermestaz, John Barth, Annika Deschler, and Brandon Kodritz. Our technical director is Steve Mork. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'll talk to you soon.